Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Sales Cadence Podcast. My name's Matt Sykes, I'm your host, and joining me on the episode today is Ollie Matthews. Ollie is a functional health coach. He specialises in preventative health and fitness and nutrition advice, and I brought him onto the podcast today to help me understand more about the whole world of sleep and are you getting enough? And if you're not getting enough, what impact does that have on you? Because let's be honest about it, folks. We're all out there trying to earn a coin. We're trying to do deals. We're trying to engage with people. And if our sleep is nowhere near where it needs to be, the implications of that in terms of how we show up and be our best obviously gets challenged. And that's really what Ollie's going to help me understand on this episode. Loads and loads of practical advice. Some of the stuff you might already know. Certainly some stuff that I didn't know. Hope you're going to get loads from it. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me introduce you to Ollie Matthews. I thank you. Ollie Matthews, welcome to the podcast, my friend. What an absolute pleasure. Can I just say for the listeners, it's probably been about 3 or 4 years since Ollie very kindly, well, you got me on your podcast, didn't you?
It was just after the first lockdown.
That's a long time ago, mate. And so I'm really, really sorry. It's taken me a long time to get you onto mine, but it's just so great to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for taking the time. Where do we go with this? Crikey, mate. I mean, look, there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are in the sales industry. They're all running around like mad things, trying to hit unachievable targets. It's a busy world out there. Here we are in the sort of coming up to Q1 2024. The economy's a little bit depressed. There's some political uncertainty. There's some global uncertainty. So it's some pretty challenging times, and it's quite easy for people to, I wouldn't say lean on those for excuses, but it's certainly easy for people to point at reasons why it's a bit of a challenge. And I know from my own experience, when there's a bit of noise out there in the marketplace, that can also have an impact on me, whether it's mental health or physical health. And, you know, I've got you on this podcast first and foremost because you're a specialist in the world of health. And so I really want to unpack the health side of things rather than anything to do with sort of, you know, mental well-being. We can touch on that if you want, but it's really what I'd really like to do is pick your brains about health, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just for the benefit of the listeners, Ollie, just give them a 60-second background around you, what you do today. We'll talk about the past in a little while, but just give people a 60-second pitch, if you like.
I'm a functional medicine doctor, nutritionist, health coach, and I class myself as an elite trainer with the people that I've worked with, from entrepreneurs all around the world, celebrities, and just people that have just been pushing their health to the side with stress. And I've managed to write a couple of books, speak all over the world, and now I'm back here in Norwich and adding more and more value, hopefully.
All right, stock questions. Let's go right back to your very early years in life. Some point in education, you decided actually having no money is no fun. Do you remember what you did when you earned your first pound, Ollie?
Paper round and then working on a fruit and veg stall on Norwich Market when I was 15.
That's a great education, by the way, working on a market stall.
It was amazing.
Bit of upsell?
Trying.
There you go, yeah. You want some tomatoes, do you love? I've got some wonderful pears. Just come in. Let's jump into, so just describe very briefly your business, how it operates, how it functions. How do you, for want of a better expression, how do you create wealth for yourself within your business?
It's usually a case of signs that people are burning out or they're under excess stress, waking through the night, brain fog, bloating, just problems with being able to lose weight, hormone issues. And there's a bit of content that resonates. Oh, he sounds like he's talking to me. The amount of times I've been told that reel sounds like you're talking to me. And then someone comes to me, we make sure it's the right thing as well. It's not a case of someone just signing up for the sake of signing up. I have to make sure I can be able to support them. They have to be ready to change, because some of the things we have to do if someone's in an extreme health state when we work with their nutrition is we might have to be quite restrictive. We may not, but if someone's health is really bad, we want to get restrictive to improve the health to get to a very flexible place. So we design protocols based around their lifestyle, based around their nutrition, what we need to do, increase protein or get more vegetables in. And we make sure that it works for them. Like what works for you isn't necessarily going to work for me. What works for someone that's working from home isn't going to work with someone that's got a 6-7 figure business and 40 staff members, and they're not able to cook all their meals. So it's finding that health is an individual based thing, but we go into so many different group based protocols and we want everything to fit this one size fits all. But that's why we don't get the results. So we base it individually, we check in regularly, and we adapt as we need to, as the body adapts, as the seasons change, to make sure that we're constantly moving ahead to improve health. And my goal, in all honesty, is to get sacked as quickly as possible, because I want to teach people how to be sustainable, and they end up that they can go ahead and do it themselves. And it usually takes around 3 to 6 months.
A couple of things there. So you mentioned the word restrictive. What does that mean?
Where people are having to take so many different foods out, alcohol's a big one. There's nothing scientifically healthy about alcohol when you look at the science, but it's such a societal norm that when we go to events, there's so much alcohol about. So actually getting the body from a place where maybe it's not in a healthy state to be able to have any alcohol, to being able to have 1 or 2 a week, not craving alcohol, but being able to have 1 or 2 a week and not feel the negative impact of that.
And then the second thing was just to get a bit more clarity for myself around. So you're working, sounds like 1-to-1?
Yep, 1-to-1. I do work in businesses as well, but when I go into businesses, it's more working with their staff, still on a 1-to-1 basis, but I'm doing it. I go in an afternoon and we work back to back 1-to-1.
Okay. All right, good. Okay, so let's, I'm sort of 55 now. I like to think I keep myself in reasonably good shape. And, even with my limited knowledge around sort of health and well-being, in my head, I was making some notes before we started. It's probably some key pillars when it comes to, let's say, performance, whether that's high performance or even, I guess, low performance as well. There's some pillars that prop us up. And I thought, okay, so I suspect there's probably 3. I think there's probably, clearly you've got to be careful of what you eat. So we'll call nutrition the first one. The second one then would be, one would assume that if you don't do some form of exercise, that's going to have an impact. So that would be the second one. And then the third one obviously is recovery or sleep. Would that be a fair assumption for someone like me to come to the conclusion that there's probably 3 key pillars?
Yeah, if we nail those, you'll be well away.
Okay. Now, we aren't going to have enough time to do all 3. So I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to say sleep. And I'll tell you why sleep. It's because that's the one thing out of the 3 I think we can have quite a lot of control over.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean to say we can't control what we put in our mouth. But it's certainly a lot harder to motivate myself sometimes to do exercise, and it's quite easy for me to eat anything I want. Whereas sleep is a kind of a given. At some point, you fall over and you collapse. So you're gonna do the sleep. So if you're okay, let's pick sleep, shall we?
Yeah, I feel sleep is the most important out of all 3.
Yeah, and it probably could. It could well be that has an impact on the others. Perhaps you can help me understand that. So let's start right at the beginning. I know it's a silly question to ask, but how important is sleep?
In studies, there was a study done by Aviva talking about sleep a few years ago. And if you were sleep deprived, it was the equivalent of drink driving. Like sleep deprived for, I think it was 4 or 5 nights in a row. And they class sleep deprived as 7 or less hours of sleep, regularly getting 7 hours or less, or less than 7 hours, sleep. So we need to get 7 hours sleep in order not to be sleep deprived. And how many people are actually getting 7 hours sleep, actually being in bed for 7 hours? Because we live these busy lives. And as you think about it, when you're running a business, when you're in sales, you want to get that sale. You want to get that client over the line, right? And if they email you at 9 p.m., we want to reply straight away. And we can be our own worst enemies. I absolutely have been my own worst enemy, where I have clients in different time zones. They text me at 8, 9 p.m. at night, and I want to reply. So we're then impacting our sleep to get ahead with our targets, but then our body slows down. What happens with detrimental sleep is that even 2 weeks of sleep deprivation, it can lower our testosterone by around 10 to 15% over 30 years old. So that equivalent of aging ourselves 10 to 15 years in hormonal status in just 2 weeks.
And that's as a direct consequence of not having enough sleep.
Yep. And then we look at the implications of that is that our ability to refrain from sugar, from things we're not supposed to be doing, from getting distracted, goes down. So we start eating worse, which then means our sleep gets even worse because of poor blood sugar management. So it's a vicious circle. Then we're not drinking enough because then we're using caffeine and things to get ahead. And then we need alcohol to switch off because of the caffeine. So we don't get hydrated enough.
And then I guess I noticed that, and partly because I had a Whoop band for a while, and so I was getting some feedback from the data that the Whoop band was serving up. But I could absolutely notice on the nights when I was having a few drinks that my recovery was really poor.
Yep.
So why is that? What's going on there?
The way your body has to deal with alcohol, it's got 7 calories per gram. Calories being a marker of energy that our body should be able to use. Whereas you look at proteins and carbohydrates, there's 4 calories per gram. Fats, depending on the type, 8 to 9 calories per gram. So our body uses these for energy, has to burn these as a marker of energy to burn. But the calories in alcohol, it can't use for energy. So it still has to facilitate the burning of these 7 calories per gram, but it can't get any actual usable energy out of it. And it's basically trying to spend monopoly money to pay your bills. It's not going to happen. Like, the bank's not going to accept it. And there's also then the implications on stress on your system with the way your body will have to detox it. It also interacts with cells which should be keeping you awake, which are also linked with caffeine, these adenosine receptors, and makes you tired. And then it also can impact areas of your brain which deal with long and short-term memory, with fear, with decision-making. So there's a lot of things going on when we have alcohol.
And so if we bring it back into the sleep thing, sounds like it's not just a case of, I had 7 hours, I got to bed at 11 and I got up at 6, because that's 7 hours. It's not quite as straightforward as that, right?
We have to get into different stages of sleep as well. And if we're then going into alcohol, getting alcohol in our system, we're not going to get a lot of deep sleep and REM, rapid eye movement sleep, where we actually dream and get restorative and recover. And most of our recovery of our body, of our cells, of our rejuvenating our cells, improving our hormonal status, rejuvenating our gut lining, is done when we're asleep, because there's nothing else going on apart from we want to recover.
And so I was going to wonder if there were any misconceptions about sleep, because one of the things I was thinking about when I was making my notes this morning was there used to be a prime minister of this country called Margaret Thatcher, and she used to exist on between 3 and 4 hours of sleep a night. But it's clear by the sounds of things, and the science I assume backs this up, that 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night ain't going to cut it, right?
No. If you look at hormonal status, if we're doing blood tests now, she was late 80s that she was in prime minister?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I can't speak for certain whether she was doing blood tests or not, but I'm pretty certain she wasn't doing blood tests with hormones, and we don't know what her health was actually like.
Yeah.
So just hearing a prime minister who's leading the country, and from what I can make out, that it seems that people think she was quite successful as a leader, but being successful in business, which is what she's doing, running a country, does that mean we're automatically successful in health as well? What are people going through behind the scenes? Like, is she sleeping 4 or 5 hours because she's waking up and not able to get to sleep? I see a lot of people do that, waking up at 4 o'clock, and then they say, right, I'm going to win the day. I'm going to smash it. I'm going to be part of the 5 a.m. club. And then actually it's because they're so stressed out, their body won't let them sleep past, because they've got poor blood glucose management. And they feel good because they're pushing adrenaline, they're pushing cortisol, they're pushing stress hormones. So their brain's wired, but then suddenly they crash.
Yeah. It's interesting, actually, because like you, I work for myself. I guess you tell me otherwise, but you in the past may have had those moments where, for whatever reason, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're wide awake and there's something on your mind. So mentally as well, there's obviously an implication of where you're at mentally in terms of how you sleep. That must be a link. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that this happens, I've mentioned glucose management, and we need glucose to fuel the brain. And what happens when we go a long time without food, we have these dips in glucose. Now, your brain is very functional through the night. It burns a lot of calories. And when this glucose dips, we have to get that fuel to the brain. We can't have it run out of fuel. And in doing that, it boosts cortisol. We release, our adrenals release cortisol because its prime objective, the prime objective of cortisol is to boost our blood sugars, which cortisol being the stress hormone, we've just boosted it. Now, this also happens when we wake up in the morning. We have a thing called your cortisol awakening response. We want cortisol high in the first hour when we wake up, going up and then coming down, which is one of the reasons we have these false starts with snooze buttons. And there's studies that show that people that use the snooze button are more likely to have heart attacks because there's this false start of this cortisol awakening response. Now, if our cortisol is up and our body thinks it's time to wake up, but it's 2 a.m, it's no surprise that we're also stressed and wired because this stress hormone is going through our body so much.
Right.
So we're going to think about
it's our own personal alarm clock then, unfortunately,
exactly.
At the wrong time.
At the wrong time, yeah. It's on the wrong time zone.
Right. Fascinating. And so understanding that good sleep hygiene is really important. It'd be good to touch on diet, actually, because if being careful with how we drink and when we drink is going to have an impact on our ability to sleep well. Therefore, if we overdrink or we drink at the wrong times or whatever that might be, or too often, that's going to have a negative impact. What other things have a negative impact on our sleep?
When we've got our phones and we're doing this all the time, we're literally scrolling through late at night. We're on screens late at night. The technology, I'm sure you would have heard of blue light, and technology emits this blue light, which is what the sun emits. And our brain sees that. And what happens is it thinks it's morning. It thinks it's time to wake up. So actually having light in the evening wakes us up. We need very bright light in the morning to wake us up. Hence why our screens don't wake us up in the morning. If you're out in the sunlight, that will help regulate your hormones and your bodily functions. So that's a big thing. Eating big meals later in the evening can definitely be a big impact, have a massive impact, because your body is fully digesting this food, struggling with digesting the food when it needs to be recovering, detoxifying and rejuvenating through sleep.
Is there a cutoff period then for nutrition, or when you should?
I usually say with people 3-2-1 rule. 3 hours before bed, not having any main meals. 2 hours before bed, no work. 1 hour before bed, no technology.
Okay.
And that's just easy to remember. It's not going to happen all the time. And like there's events that happen where they don't serve the meals until 9 o'clock. I had someone yesterday who's over in Spain and they eat later. And it's very much that if you can do it the majority of the time, I don't eat. I stop eating at around 7:30, but I go to bed around 9:30. So some days I notice if I can finish at 5-6 o'clock, great. But how does that work when you've got a partner that works and you want to then have your meal together in the evening? It's not always going to work, but it's doing the best you can to do it on the days you can do it.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And so we've talked about alcohol reduction of consumption, how that works or doesn't work when it comes to sleep. We've talked about diet. Let me ask you about the last one then, that other pillar, which is exercise. Can exercise have a negative impact?
Exercise boosts cortisol. And as we said about this cortisol awakening response in the morning, and then it comes down. There's a thing called melatonin, which is a hormone that helps us sleep. And that boosts up around 5 hours before normal bedtime and when the sun goes down. Now, cortisol and melatonin are invertedly related. So basically, when one's high, the other one will be low. And they can't both be high. So if we're doing hard exercise sessions in the evening, chances are that's going to be impacting sleep. Now, some people can't work out earlier in the day. I would recommend doing it if you can, but trying to not go literally all out on your workouts, not going really nuts on your workouts, smashing classes, or if you are, at least having a meal pretty close to it that includes carbohydrates, purely to help lower your cortisol levels afterwards, or doing things like breathing exercises to help you wind down, doing a good wind down. But I think that there's one thing with sleep which people forget about is the timing of everything, of just being consistent with things, as consistent as possible. We look to overcomplicate things. What's the best exercise regime? What's the best nutrition? What's the best sleep protocol? It's the one you can follow and you can do consistently to be able to get the results you want. Don't sprint.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so getting into some kind of routine obviously just then almost like stimulates continuous action, right?
Yeah. And I think the sleep time and wake times, they are probably the most underrated thing for improving your sleep. Sleeping at the same time and waking at the same time, including weekends, gives your body the time when you're going to be switching off and the time you're going to be waking up. It's actually shown that we've got the daylight savings times coming up. Daylight savings? Is it savings? Yeah.
I don't know.
Changing the clocks.
Clocks go back.
Getting all over the show. And America done it 2 weeks ago, and it doesn't sync up on Google Calendar. It's the most confusing
clocks go
2
forward.
weeks. Clocks go forward. Yeah.
Spring forward, fall back.
Yeah. Spring forward, fall back. But there's more heart attacks. There's more people going to hospital. There's more strokes the day after those clocks change. And that's 1 hour. Now imagine people that are doing this, going to sleep at 10 o'clock, gets to Friday night, they have a few drinks and have a takeaway, going to sleep at midnight. Then they're waking up on Saturday at 9 o'clock, having brunch, food's all over the show, eating more food, drinking more, going to sleep late, doing the same thing late, waking up late on Sunday, have a big roast mid-afternoon. Then they end up trying to get to sleep at 10 o'clock and their body's not able to because it's socially jet lagged. So it's doing that through the week all the time anyway.
What are the triggers then, Ollie? How does anyone who's listening to this go, hang on a second, that's happening to me? What are the triggers that say actually your sleep hygiene or your sleep performance ain't that great?
If you're having to have caffeine to function first thing in the morning, that's going to be a big impact. So trying to limit or not have any caffeine for the first 90 minutes to 2 hours, you struggle with that. Oh, if you're having problems with sleep, that's probably one of the reasons. Getting afternoon energy.
Before you move off the caffeine one, because that's quite an important one for me.
I love coffee.
Yeah, me too, brother. And actually, I get the idea behind that sort of period of caffeine fasting, let's call it that period of an hour to 2 hours is really so that you don't replace the body's natural high stimulator, right? That thing you were talking about earlier.
So the adenosine, we have these receptors. Adenosine has to bind to them and get worn off. It's the adenosine that makes us feel tired.
Right. And what we don't want to be doing is replacing that.
Yeah, caffeine goes in and binds to those receptors. So the adenosine is still rolling around waiting to get in, but they're full. And it takes like around 5 to 6 hours for that to wear off. So around 5 to 6 hours after, we need more caffeine. And chances are like someone's just eaten, so they don't have that dip straight away at lunchtime. They have it in the afternoon.
One of the first things you do after you've checked your phone is to go and stick the coffee on. That's a kind of an indication that you might want to just see how things are going with your sleep, right?
Yep, exactly.
What else is going to be a trigger that says sleep's not great for you? Other than falling asleep at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I guess.
Yeah, falling asleep. It could be that you're struggling to lose weight and you're constantly craving foods. So we see hormone issues. We see a lot of guys with higher estrogen. We see a lot of women with estrogen problems, and maybe PCOS comes in, one of the most common hormone conditions for women.
So without going too deep into the technical scientific side of this, hormones, and forgive all the female listeners who listen to this just for a second, indulge me. For a male like myself, hormones, talk to me just a bit about that and the impact of sleep.
The male hormone as such, women need a good amount of testosterone as well, but the male hormone for drive and for kind of motivation and to push, and I don't want to say anger, but that kind of that determination to go through is testosterone. That lowers as we get older anyway, from 30 years old, even with really good lifestyle, around a percentage loss throughout. Now, we have total and free. Total is the amount we're making, and free is the amount in the body we can use in the body. And if we have poor sleep, we then get poor liver function because we're not detoxifying as effectively, and we can't convert as much total to free. And we also need to clear hormones once we've used them. So the body says, right, we've used that, we can now make some more. But what happens is when we don't get good sleep, when there's more stress on the body, when there's more toxin exposure, those hormones hang around and kind of like get back into the club. They're basically like when people hang around after the cinema. I've never obviously done it and then gone into another film for free. But when they used to do that, like that's the sort of thing that's happening. And with poor sleep, we're not able to clear those hormones that we've used. So we then create new ones. And then also with poor sleep, we have poor blood glucose management, which is detrimental, very detrimental to poor hormonal balance.
Crikey. It's like a pack of cards or a domino effect, right?
Well, yeah, but then there's one thing. I was speaking to a good friend of mine, John Norman, who's the pastor, and I'd done a talk with him, and we'd done it at the church, question and answers. And he said the one thing that had people comment on that came from that was that he said about late night snackcidents. Why does he do really well through the day, and it gets to 9:30, 10 o'clock, and he's just craving some sugar? And I said, the reason that you're craving sugar, why do we need sugar? It's energy. Why would we need energy? Because we're tired. So what could you do instead? Go to bed. And it's such a big sign that we need to get sleep, get recovery. But look, you've used the Whoop band. There's so much technology out there. If your heart rate variability is regularly below 60, then that's a sign your body is under excess stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these things tell you.
That's interesting, actually. And what you just said there about John was actually your body's trying to tell you. So why don't you listen to it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny how it wants to tell you, listen, it's not going the way we want it to go, guys.
Yeah, we don't just mute the notifications like we do on our phone.
That's such a good analogy. Yeah. Brilliant. Folks, I want to briefly interrupt this show to share a word from our sponsor. Sales Cadence, my sales training and coaching company, provides the investment that brings this show to you, and I want to share something with you that I think you might find useful. You see, all of my clients who invest in my sales training and coaching get access to a whole variety of really helpful sales content. And one of the things that tends to get asked for more than most is how do you ask really insightful questions during discovery and qualification. You see, time spent here positively challenging and inspiring buyers tends to lead ultimately to the events that lead to a sale. And I want to share with you 75 of the right questions to ask your prospect with you. It's my gift to you for being a listener to the podcast. So look, if you'd like to receive the 75 right questions to ask, the ones that will reassure, create impact, inspire growth, avoid the things that get deals hijacked, and create seamless transition towards a close, simply connect with me on LinkedIn and then direct message me with the word RIGHT, RIGHT, and they're yours. Now back to the episode. Okay, so look, we've talked about the misery of not doing the sleep thing correctly. One or two sort of tips that, I guess there's some obvious ones, but I suspect there's also some perhaps not quite so obvious ones out there. So I've listened to a few podcasts and I've done a little bit of research into sleep, nowhere near the knowledge that you've got, but the environment that you're in is obviously quite important, isn't it?
Yeah. I think, and this is one of the old terrace houses that we live in, and people forget about the environment they're in, like having good airflow, but the quality of air will impact sleep. And mold exposures, we can't just bleach it off. There's mycotoxins in mold, and these toxins will really impact your hormonal status. They have what we call endocrine disruptors in there. So they impact your endocrine, your hormone system, to mean that we might have more of an impact on testosterone and estrogen or less, or we get confused as to what it is. But that can then impact your gut microbiome. It can impact what we call your lung microbiome. It can impact your mouth microbiome. All these microbiomes that are all around your body. And those then have to send signals to and from the brain. And those signals get muddled up. So the airflow is probably one of the big things, and body temperature as well.
Before we go to body temperature, let's just talk about airflow. So what advice would you give to someone if they want to take advantage of quality of air?
It's having air purifiers. There's a thing called a HEPA air filter, HEPA, and it's just like the rating. But I've got one down here, one in the bedroom, one in the living room. And I mean, to get a decent one, it's like 150, 200 pounds. But I'm breathing in this air all day long.
Right. What's it doing? It's cleaning the air, is it?
It helps clean the air, yeah. And some of them have a little rating. Like if you're cooking, like we have ours on in the living room, and when the kitchen next door we're cooking, it'll go nuts. Especially if you leave your steak on too much. Like first off, don't have your steak well done anyway. But it then goes absolutely nuts at you and takes ages to bring that air quality down. But also dehumidifiers as well, if you've got damp, like having them running regularly really, really is powerful. But I think that there's two things that I do for sleep three things, all to do with things we do when we sleep. One, having an eye mask. I use, and there's no affiliations with the company, I use a Manta Pro eye mask because it's got these cushions so it doesn't touch my eyes. But I'm really sensitive to like certain feelings and stuff, and I don't want an eye mask to touch my eyelashes. So that really helps. I use nose tape,
Yeah.
so I look like the Robbie Fowler of old days. So that's
listen,
like,
I've started using that myself literally in the last couple of weeks. Yeah, my son bought a box of about 250 of these things, and I just tried it. And I thought, wow, that's a completely different experience.
yeah. And then the other one is mouth taping, which so it's a good excuse to not have conversations with your missus sometimes. But
so you literally can't speak, breathe brilliantly, and can't see.
Yeah,
fascinating. If you're in a hotel and the fire alarm goes off, it's like you run downstairs like that.
Yeah, I think like with those as well, snoring. If you're a snorer, you're not getting good quality sleep. And we laugh and joke about it, but people that snore, they wake up with a dry mouth. If we want to say like these are symptoms that we said about the brain fog and stuff, these are two massive ones. Like ask your partner if you snore, and if you do, you're not getting really good sleep.
I suspect the person next to them isn't getting it either.
Yeah, exactly. You notice with different foods. Like if I have a lot of dairy, if I have something where, like, yeah, I'm not someone that never ever eats sugar. My body can deal with it pretty decent. But if I go a bit over the top, I'll have breathing issues and like snore a little bit. Even with these mouth strips on, they're not literally a magic pill where you sort it and then you put them on and everything's fixed. So that's a big thing. And if you're waking up during the night to go to the toilet because of that glucose thing, like we mentioned as well earlier with the cortisol spike, people say, I'm just drinking too much water. And actually, it's a stress response. You're not usually waking up because you need the toilet. You need in the toilet because you're waking up.
Right. That's interesting. Because let me positively challenge that point, or at least help me understand a bit more about that. Because my wife very kindly bought me one of these things for Christmas.
That's sort of lighting up. That's a snazzy thing.
Yeah, what it does is it reminds you if you're not drinking regularly. So it lights up. You set it. You set it so that what hours do you want to be drinking water, and how much do you want to be drinking, basically. And then what it does is if you're not having a drink to meet those targets, it flashes and lets you know, hey, Matt, you haven't had a drink for 30 minutes, whatever it is. So actually, I found it really useful. And here we are, sort of middle of March. So I've been on it for, over 12 weeks now. And it's really actually working quite well. I've never before have I been in a situation, Ollie, where I've been consistently drinking at least 2 litres of water a day.
That's good.
But what I found is, so the huge benefits, I think. I feel different. I'm much more active. I'm not sleepy. But the flip side of that is if you're not careful and you're still trying to get 2 litres in beyond 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I think that's when it starts to become a problem in the evening, because there have been occasions in the past where I've woken up and needed to go to the toilet.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. Your kidneys will filter a lot more around 10 hours after your waking time, for around 10 hours. So if you can get your 2 litres in for that and then just sip water afterwards,
yeah,
that's what I would look at. And it's roughly, not everyone's going to be 10 hours stop. It's roughly around 10 hours from your waking time. So that's 4 o'clock if you're waking up at 6 a.m. Then after 4 o'clock, just sip water a little bit. But also add a pinch of Himalayan rock salt or Celtic rock salt just for remineralization, or get some good quality hydration drops. You shouldn't be able to taste it, but just help that water do what it needs to do. Now you're getting 2 litres in. Just help that water actually get into the cells, get into the body, and help your body rejuvenate.
And that salt you just described is what does that, right?
Yeah, pink Himalayan rock salt is a very good one. And again, I've had people say, it tastes horrible. You shouldn't be able to taste it. You're having far too much if you do that. Just a tiny, tiny pinch and just add it in there.
Love it. So eye mask. So at night time, obviously already had a load of value off this 3-2-1 rule. I love that. Actually, when you're in bed, eye mask. My wife wears an eye mask, actually, so I can understand the benefits. That's literally creating some sort of blackout environment, right?
Yeah.
That's the purpose behind that. And then obviously if there's, use the nose tape as well. If you're listening and you've never used it before, just go and buy a few and try it. It's a really interesting place, isn't it?
Yeah, and they're not expensive. It's cheap.
They're not, and it's really, you don't feel like you're wearing it, and it's a completely different quality of breath, for want of a better expression. It's it totally opens up your nasal cavities, and it's just quite weird. And then I guess if you're snoring, then the tape obviously then restricts your ability to use your mouth for obvious reasons. And if you wear it in combination with the nose tape, then
we get more oxygenated if we breathe through our nose rather than our mouth. We're not designed to be mouth breathers, and that is much more stressful on the body. There's one last thing that I would say to people is don't have your phone in your bedroom. Don't have your phone. Don't be watching TV in your bedroom. It's literally, we don't want to have these electronics in there because the EMF, the electromagnetic fields, can have an issue. But it's not even going down that far in science. It's that when we wake up during the middle of the night, what do? We end up just instinctively picking our phone up, looking at it, blue light flashing. We wonder why we're awake. We then go to the bathroom, flick on the light to have a wee, and then we have Blackpool illuminations going on. So just be aware of your light exposure, because we can always see a reason for people waking up. Have a small amount of protein if you wake up and can't get back to sleep, like 10, 15 grams of good quality nut butter, slice of ham, these sorts of things. But if your phone is your alarm clock, first off, you've got some successful people listening to your podcast. I'm sure they can afford £10, £15 for an alarm clock.
Oh, without doubt.
So, but there's also
my lot.
there's a alarm clock called a Lumi lamp, and I swear by this. I've had one for probably about 6-7 years, and what that does, it's not as effective in the summertime because the light actually is the sun's already up. But if you've got good blinds, you still need one, and it lights up over 30 minutes. So if you set it for 5:30, from 5 o'clock it'll slowly light up, and it'll stay bright until 6 o'clock, then turn off. And it's hard to describe the feeling. It's like you can see the sun's coming up. So you wake up, there's no noise, and I've only had to use the alarm on it when I've had an early flight to Heathrow and I've had to leave at like 3 o'clock, 3:30 or something. And it just wakes you up, and you feel much more refreshed when you wake up, because your body, which works in those sleep cycles are around 90 minutes, it naturally wakes up when it needs to wake up in that time.
Yeah, and I'll go back to that Whoop band I used to have. If you get it right, and again, I maybe I just got lucky, but on the occasions when I woke up at the right point, the point you're now mentioning, the right time to wake up, you feel alive, don't you? You don't feel groggy, you don't feel half asleep for obvious reasons. You feel totally alive, don't you?
Exactly.
It's getting that timing right, I suspect.
Yeah. Even in the winter when it's cold, it's easy. It's not easy. It's easier to get out of bed, because you're just not wanting to go back to sleep.
I can't remember if we touched on it or not, but if we did, let's go over it again and just sort of bottom out those tips. I was always in the understanding that actually in your bedroom, the temperature wants to be lower, not higher. Yep. You want a colder room. Is that right?
Yeah. So you want to be, it's around sort of, I think it's 18, 19 degrees Celsius is where people say. I always have the window open and fan on. And I've used, you can get mattress covers that have kind of like 8 sleep and chili pads, which actually you can temperature control. Because in theory, our body temperature should be the lowest, I believe it's about 2 hours before actual wake up time. Again, why it's important to have consistent wake up time. Because if I wake up at 5:30, at 3:30, my lowest body temperature should be there, and then it should start heating up. Hence why we should be warmer when we wake up. And hence why in the evening, a warm shower, because it increases our body temperature, we then want to cool down to get to sleep. But in the morning, a cold shower should wake us up more.
I just want to revisit one thing you said a little while ago, which was quite interesting. So if you do happen to wake up in the middle of the night, on those occasions, if people wake up and they find themselves can't get back to sleep, you mentioned something about protein.
Yeah. So remember we said about glucose being an issue, and cortisol and glucose being massively one of the reasons why you wake up. If we have a little bit of protein, it can help our glucose management. So if you're constantly waking up at a certain time, say you're constantly waking up at 2-3 o'clock, before you go to bed, have a slice of good quality ham or some nut butter. Not one with like, you used to get all the old sun pat and stuff like that. Those were the days when I used to have so much of that. But it's like 100% nuts, the good quality nut butter. Have a spoonful of that and just see if that sleep time change, like wake up time changes a little bit. But if you do find yourself in the middle of the night waking up and you think, I'm not going to get back to sleep, just go downstairs, minimal lighting if you can. Like I've got the Garmin, and like when we like flick it twice, it puts a little red light on. So it's awesome for that. But if I have half a scoop of protein, or I'll go and have a slice or two of ham, and it will help me get back to sleep.
And what is it about protein though? What is it about protein, Ollie?
It just helps stabilize the glucose levels, because it's usually low in GI, glycemic index, which is the rate that the glucose will get into our bloodstream. It slows down digestion, and it's also responsible of releasing enzymes so when we have the protein get into the stomach, hydrochloric acid, which betaine HCl hydrochloric acid is what is the big digestive enzyme for protein. So we can get that working better. That then helps stimulate other enzymes for digesting carbohydrates and fats. So it's very much that we have the protein, stabilize our blood sugar levels. It's just consistent fuel for the body. And that's not to demonize carbs. It's just you don't want to be boosting your sugar levels even more when you wake up during the night.
Before we sort of round things off, I just want to go back to you and your business. And so how long was Ojay Health is your business company, right?
Ojay Health, yep.
When did you found that company?
It was 2000. Sole trader was 2014.
Same time as me. So you're coming up, this is your 10th year then, basically.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Essentially, supporting people with, optimal health, nutrition, exercise, typically one-to-one, but you did mention that you obviously work with organizations as well, but predominantly one-to-one stuff. In those 10 years, can you think of a time when all of a sudden selling became quite important? I sometimes refer that as the holy shit moment. It's like, oh my God, I need to go out and do something to try and bring some money in. Was there ever a
few times on the roller coaster of being a business owner, but I think there was like, when I handed my notice in right at the start, so I worked at some big insurance company beginning with A here in Norwich, and I was off panic attacks and stuff for like 3 months. I was stressed out, and then I went back on a phased return. And I was doing some PT then. It was back when one of the local gym opened up, done some PT, and I don't do any one-to-one PT now. It's all functional medicine, blood testing, and going deeper into hormones and stuff. But you do this phased return, and you go from 2 days a week working to 3 days to 4 days. And I wanted to drop a day. And then Aviva wouldn't let me go less than 3 days a week. So you're currently maxed out on PT, and that was like 700 quid a month. And I was getting 700 quid from Aviva. And it's like, what do I do? Like, I need to get rid of this Aviva stuff to then be able to get more here. And that was when it became a little bit more to say, look, okay, need to get some more money in. And to think of it now, like getting that amount in per month would be nothing. But actually, like that was a lot back then. There was a lot to do it. And knowing you had to do it within a month before your next paycheck. If not, you wouldn't pay your bills. I think that was a big jump. But yeah, things like when I've bought courses to know that I need to do these courses. So you put it on a credit card and you have to do that sort of thing. I've had it. My wife leave her corporate job at one point and thought she was going to be off for 3 months, and then it ended up being nearly a year. So those things do make you kind of pull your finger out.
Well, I think those things make you.
They make you, and they realize what's possible as well. And I think with myself, like with the autism and his ADHD going on as well, one thing I used to hate at school was leaving my homework until the night before. And sometimes in my head, I leave like actually pushing and pushing and pushing until I have no choice but to push. But also, like, this is me like having a realization on a podcast, is that I'm expecting my customers, my clients, my people to not wait until they have no choice but to be healthy to improve their health. And so, yeah, this is me being accountable to say that's not going to be something that's happening.
Good for you, mate. Within the 10 years, obviously some spectacular highs, some maybe one or two lows. That's certainly the case for me, and will probably continue to be so. Best sale you ever made? Because you've worked with a few celebrity type people, I guess. You've worked with some professional athletes, so I don't know if any of those sort of come into when I say to you, what was the best sale you ever made? The one where you thought, I'm really glad I landed that one.
Well, there's two. I mean, I've worked with someone now who's like one of the top soul singers in the UK, and we're working with her doing a West End show, and it's amazing to do that sort of thing. But there's two people. There's one guy that signed up, a guy called Rick Barker, and 2 hours after saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, I know what to do, I need you to tell me to do it. We're on the phone, and I Googled him and thought, why is Taylor Swift's manager messaging me? And then 3 months later, I'm in his house in Nashville. Like, we're doing a musician's health course, and he was Taylor's first manager and good friend still when they launched her career, when Kanye jumped on the stage for like the first 3-4 years of her career. But I think like the biggest kind of wow moment was a couple of years ago. I was speaking in Colombia, and then we had this outing, and we hiked down a mountain, and then whitewater rafted into the middle of the rainforest and camped out in the rainforest overnight. And we're all around a campfire, and like people were saying how these people had changed their lives. And someone signed up the next day after it, and I hadn't ever sold a 12-month package before. This is the same person that told me to increase my prices the day before.
Right.
And said, no, I'm paying the new prices.
Amazing.
And I was like, that was my annual salary.
Yeah.
When I went into sales at Aviva for someone coming in. Well, actually, it wasn't annual salary. It was like annual number in dollars versus pounds. Let's forget the conversion. But
it was
basically a year's wages in one.
It was
client.
A flip ton of money, basically.
Yeah, it was in one client. And okay, I've changed my prices now. I've actually lowered them to focus more on local and to help more people, knowing that corporate stuff is going to be the thing that helps me with that. And I think it's having people come back to you, whether they've been a client or not, and they've implemented what you said. And I had someone say to me the other day that she feels absolutely amazing. She's finally dropping weight, and she'd taken things on board and implemented. She couldn't afford to work with me. And I thought, you know what? This means so much. It's why I put out so much free content, because yeah, I've got to pay the bills. Yeah, I want to be abundant, and I know that money's coming in and so on. And you want to strive for more and more, but I still want to help people, because I saw my dad die because of stress, that I want to do every single thing I can to just have an impact. And those moments are ridiculously powerful. So powerful.
Mate, it's been amen to that, by the way. And, the more people you help, mate, the better. And just keep doing what you're doing.
Money takes care of itself.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, obviously I want to direct people to you. Where's the best place to send them, Ollie?
So ojayhealth.com. So ojayhealth.com. Instagram, Ollie Matthews Health. LinkedIn, Ollie Matthews. Just any questions, because health it can be a private matter for people. And I think going in comments and saying, oh, I've got this problem or that problem, or this resonated with me, I find people just communicate more in messages, and they're more honest and open.
I'm a huge believer in preventative care. So I have a chiropractor once a month where I have a neck adjustment done. There's nothing wrong with me, but it's probably because I have a chiropractic adjustment once a month that is the reason why there's nothing wrong with me. Yeah, I don't have headaches or anything like that. And so I'm a huge believer in if we can try and change some kind of push a lever where people go, actually, I'm not going to wait till I become ill. I'm going to do things to avoid becoming ill myself. Okay, there's some genetic stuff that we can't control. We accept that. But doing more of the work that you do so that people take a far more proactive approach to looking after themselves so that bad things don't happen to them, that's a blessing, mate, and that's a gift. And, I'm sorry it's taken 4 years to get you on the podcast.
It's all good. It's all good. We've had chats in that time anyway, so it's all good.
We've had chats, but I've loved every minute, and I'm so glad that you've shared so much information, especially on the sleep side. As far as the listeners of this is concerned, if they're driving around now and they're working their tail off trying to close deals and they're trying to hit targets, and they're under a little bit of pressure. Yeah, some stuff out there that you can't control in terms of the economy. But I think what you've heard from Ollie on this episode really is there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can take more control over, and it starts really with getting a good night's sleep, and then following on from that, how you can start to put great things inside your body and how you can take care a bit more of the way that you move. So, Ollie, it's been a privilege to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Thanks for having me, mate. I appreciate it.
One thing about sleep and getting enough, it's great to put into practice all the things that we've effectively talked about on this episode, but being your best in terms of your physical capability is one thing, but being your best in terms of helping people engage with you, understanding them, a lot of that comes down to your ability to know how to do the right things at the right time. And that's why, if you've got some time to spare now, just head over to my website, salescadence.co.uk. There is a page there called the Sales Audit. If you want to invest the 5 minutes it takes to complete that audit and then follow through and decide to book some time with me, I'll take some time out of my diary and spend some time with you to understand exactly how some of those scores can be corrected, improved, and you can start to put your new world of great sleep together with your new world of great sales, acumen, knowledge, and skill. Folks, thanks for listening. As always, I'm going to keep reminding you, everybody that you meet in life, they are all salespeople. Everyone's in sales. We're all selling something. Whatever it is that you're selling, go out there and be your best. And I'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Sales Cadence Podcast.